Well, welcome into the Storycraft Cafe. I am your host, Hank Garner. Today, I am super excited to have Jessie Q Sutanto on the show with me. She's got a brand new book coming out in a couple of months. It is called Vera Wong's Guide to Snooping on a Dead Man. And I was just telling Jessie, I love this book so much. This is the second book in a series. If you've been following along, the first one was Vera Wong's Unsolicited Advice for Murderers, and when that book came out, Jesse, I have to tell you that it was such a breath of fresh air for the genre, and I have been a lover of mystery stories um, for many years. Ever since my aunt handed down a box of books when I was a teenager, and with a lot of like Agatha Christie and some seminal books in the mystery genre, and it really opened my eyes to what you could do with the genre. But one thing that I they had missed in the years since was this sort of lighthearted, really that's not a great descriptor. This fun aspect to murder, if and that's such a heinous thing to say, I know, but there's something interesting about a slice of real life with real characters. And I have a big family. My wife and I have 5 kids, and our 4 oldest are married and having kids of their own, and so our family is getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And you find these interesting situations that come up when big families get together, and you have all of your kids are close, and then they become aunts and uncles, and it's hilarity ensues. So one thing that I loved about Vera Wong was this tight knit community, and this feeling of family, some actual family, some found family. And I just loved what you injected back into the genre, that everything didn't have to be the worst people in the worst situations doing horrible things to each other. And not that there's not a place for that, but anyway, I said all that to say welcome to the show, Jesse. I'm a huge fan of your books and what you're doing for the genre. Thank you for joining us today.
Oh, well, that was so nice. And thank you so much for having me.
I'm excited to have you. Jesse, I love to start conversations with a fun question to kind of set the tone for things. And one question that I love to ask people is, what is your first memory of wanting to be a writer or storyteller?
Hmm. I guess maybe when I was about 15, I just remember sitting by the window one day and kind of staring out into the sky. And uh, I was supposed to study for my exams. And I was like, I'm going to study for my English composition exam. Uh, and it was the only part that I enjoyed about the exams, and everything else I hated. So I guess I would say that was the time.
I had a similar experience that I um, grew up with dyslexia, which made
Oh,
a lot of school work very difficult. But for some reason, I loved English, and you would think that as a
mm,
dyslexic, that would be the thing that you hated the most. But for
yeah.
some reason, I faked it till I made it. But um, yeah, I can relate to that. Um, so what was the thing that you go from that desire that you had in that class to actually putting your finger on the keys or pen to paper or whatever the metaphor is for how you decided to start trying your hand at it?
Mm, well, so I didn't actually start until I graduated from college. And then I was like, oh crap, now I'm in the real world and I have no
Right.
idea what to do. And so I thought, oh, I know, I'll delay the real world by going to grad school. Um, and then I kind of narrowed it down to like two options, which
Yeah.
was creative writing or culinary school. And one of my cousins was
Two
like, "Oh, you
sides of
can't
the
go
same
to."
coin, right?
I know. One of my cousins was like, "No, you can't do culinary school because I'm doing culinary school." I don't know why we both couldn't do it. That was just
Right.
the rules. And
Right.
so I was like, "Okay, I'll do creative writing." And so I did a master's degree in creative writing. And after that,
From
I was
Oxford,
like,
right?
yes. And what was really funny was I applied to 11 places. Oxford was the last one that I applied to because I was like, oh, I'm not going to apply there. I'm never going to, make it. But then at the very last minute, I was like, oh, what the hell? I'll just throw that in. And like the other 10 rejected me, including like my safety schools, and only Oxford accepted me. So I was very convinced the whole time I was there that they had made a mistake. And I was like, well, they can't take it back now because it would be really embarrassing. Um,
Right.
so,
That's
but
hilarious.
yeah, so then uh, that was a time when it was part of the program was that you had to write I can't remember, like it was like I want to say 70 pages of a novel. I think, or maybe 90 pages. I don't know. But you had to write like a partial
Yeah,
of a novel. And so
a
that
good
was
chunk of
the
it.
first time I took it. Yeah. It
Yeah.
was the first time I took it seriously.
Wow. So what did you study for your bachelor's degree? And when you then decided, oh, now I've got to enter the real world, what were you pursuing up to that point?
English lit, which, I'm like, what do you do with an English lit degree, right?
Yeah, you become a teacher. That's what
I
most
know.
people do, I
Yeah.
think. Yeah, or go for a master's degree. So
Yeah.
what, like when you did you ever consider teaching or whatever it is that you do with an English lit degree? Did you just immediately know, no, I've got to put a finer point on this? And
No, I mean, I was really lost.
yeah.
My senior year in college, I was really burnt out, and I was so burnt out that I missed career week.
Mm,
And so all of my friends, so this was at Berkeley, so everyone is like really smart and ambitious.
yeah.
And all of my friends had secured like internships or jobs, right out of college. And I was the only one who was like, oh my God, I don't know what to do. So yeah, I was kind of flailing. I guess I had my quarter life crisis then.
Um, one thing that is kind of a hallmark of your writing, and we touched on this just a minute ago, is the humorous aspect to the books that you've written. Now, that has not always been a hallmark of your writing, and as a matter of fact, you kind of started publishing in a different vein, so to speak. So, when you first broke into publishing, what did you see yourself as? What sort of writer, what sort of stories did you see yourself telling? And kind of
Hmm.
how did you want the world to see you?
Yeah, so I was very confident that I was going to be writing young adult fantasy
Mm,
books. That
okay.
was my first book. It was a young adult fantasy. And then my second book was an adult fantasy. And so I really thought I was going to be a fantasy writer. And then my third book was a young adult suspense. So I continued writing like pretty dark things, I think, for
Yeah.
like, I think it was like six, I want to say 6 books. And um, what was funny is that I remember the entire time, like I would have writer friends, read my manuscripts to give me their feedback. And they would be like, oh, your characters are way too flippant about murder and death. You need to treat it more seriously. And so then when I first wrote, like I leaned into the humor, with Dial A for Aunties, I
Yeah.
was like, well, I keep failing to make the murders believable because the characters are too flippant about it. So how about I lean into it and just make it so ridiculous and so over the top that you know that if you want to enjoy the book, you need to kind of accept that, it's not going to be the most
Right.
realistic of things, and you're just
Sure.
there to have fun and like kind of go along for the ride. So,
What what did Dial A for Aunties, because this really was a kind of a breakout book for you in a lot of ways that, one, it made a huge splash in the publishing
mm,
industry, but I feel like, and correct me if I'm wrong, that this really changed something for you as a writer. Like you saw
yes.
yourself differently, maybe. Help us
Hmm.
understand that. But when what was the original intent? Was it just to kind of prove to yourself or maybe to others that, I've not been wrong about the flippant way that we've addressed some tough topics. Like it can be done and there's actually a good reason for it being done. Like or did you have a great story idea that you just wanted to pursue? What was that first kind of motivation for writing that book
Mm.
and sort of shifting the gears with the way that you tell stories?
So uh, most of the time, how I get my book ideas is with a premise.
Mhm.
So the first time I ever thought of Dial A for Aunties was um, four meddlesome aunties have to get rid of a dead body. I
As
think, that
one
was the
does.
first thought I had,
Yeah,
and I just thought, and then I just got like really excited about this idea,
yeah,
and it was so funny because I knew that I wanted to have some romance in it because people readers like a little bit of romance in their
sure.
books, and so I kept telling my friends like, oh my God, I have this new idea like for a rom-com, and I would tell them like, oh, this young woman accidentally kills her blind date, and then her very meddlesome aunties have to help her get rid of the bodies. And my friends would be like, "Oh my God, that sounds fantastic, but where's the romance?" And I was like, "Yeah, yeah, whatever. It'll come, it'll come." And then they were
Well, there
like, "I think
was a
you should maybe
romance
stop." Yeah,
until a dead
but they
body
were
showed
like,
up.
"Maybe stop calling it a rom-com. You haven't even thought about the romance part."
Right.
But really, like the idea came, and I was just so swept up by it because I felt this like fizzy joy of like, "Oh my God, I can't wait to write this." So it wasn't really like a conscious decision of like, oh, I'm gonna write in a totally different genre or anything. Like it was just the idea popped into my head and I got
Right.
excited.
So you say that you started with a premise and then,
Hmm.
this kind of cast of characters
Yes.
evolved as from the premise. How do you begin to think about the cast of characters that will show up in your book? You thought of this band of aunties that were kind of nosy and meddlesome, but
Hmm.
loving, obviously, for crazy reasons. But like, how do you
Hmm.
start thinking of the characters that will inhabit this world?
So with the aunties, it was very easy because they're based on my aunts and uncles. And I just view it as like, restitution for what I've had to put up with my entire life.
Yeah.
And I just kind of like, chose whatever traits that they have, like, kind of like a pick and mix thing. And I
Yeah.
made sure to like mix up everyone's little quirks enough, like such that even my mom, when she read it, she was like, "Wait, but this is not what Big Ant is really like." And then I would have to tell her, "Well, that's actually because Big Ant was based on this other person." And then she was like, "Oh my God, Big Ant is so her, you know."
Have you gotten any pushback from your real family or um do are they honored, to have your family kind of
Mhm.
show up in this way, or
Well, they don't know. So, uh, because
that's the
most of
best.
my parents' generation, their English isn't that great. So they're not able to read the books. So then I'm like, I can get away with it.
That's the best. Dial A for Aunties has really made a splash in the industry when it came out. Not only was the book well received, a lot of people got excited about it, and it's taking on new forms, isn't it?
Sorry, I think you cut out for the
Oh,
last two
yeah,
seconds.
I was saying that the when Dial A for Aunties came out, it made a big splash, not only in the
Mhm.
publishing industry, but it's getting a lot of attention and is being made into a TV series for Netflix. Is that right?
They're making it into a movie
Movie. Okay,
at
got
Netflix. Yeah.
that's exciting. What were you thinking when that ball started rolling?
So, when we started getting attention from film people, so I kept going like, oh, well, nothing is actually going to happen, nothing is actually going to come out of it. So I'm not going to get too excited or carried away.
Mm,
And then, thank goodness, my husband said to me, okay, so like chances of this actually getting picked up by a studio are like what, like 1 in 100 maybe? And I was like, yeah. And then he was like, and then chances of that actually going into production are maybe
right.
what, like 1 in 1,000? And I was like, yeah. And then he was like, okay, so chances are it isn't going to be turned into a movie and
Right.
it's never going to happen. And the excitement stops here. So why don't you enjoy the ride while it's going?
Yeah.
And so I was like, oh my God, that is so true. And he was like, enjoy it while it's happening. And then after that, be like, cool, the fun, I had fun during that
Yeah.
ride and now I'm gonna forget about it. So then I really allowed myself to like get super excited and like squealing and jumping up and down and all that stuff.
That's all. Is there any new news about it?
So last I heard is that they have a script which Netflix has okayed, which is like such a great step. And then, well, Netflix had a new, it has like a new director, a
Mhm.
new person in charge. So then they were kind of waiting for the dust to settle on that
Sure.
before, um, pitching it to him and being like, okay, does this get the green light or not?
Yeah. I'm excited for you. I can't wait to see it. If it
Thank
shows up,
you.
that'll be amazing. So
Yeah.
you start writing YA kind of fantasy, and then
Hmm.
you land on this book that resonated with so many readers. What can looking back, can you see like where the shift happened, and was it that and a lot of writers do this. We kind of try our hands at different things until we find the thing that resonates with readers. And I've met very few writers that are only interested in one genre because most of us read across a wide range of
Mm.
genres: fantasy, science fiction, mystery, thrillers, romance, whatever. Um, but there's something about finding the thing that your voice resonates with. Um, can you looking back from your vantage point now, can you look back and see why this genre or this kind of audience that you're really writing to now resonated in a way that maybe the middle grade or fantasy maybe wasn't the
Hmm.
vein where you connected with the most readers?
Yeah, I think my guess would be because this genre of like meddlesome aunties is probably where I am most authentic because, like
Mm,
I said, like I grew up with my uncles also in real life are like very meddlesome. It's not just
Right.
the aunties, like, it's I didn't put uncles in them just because I thought it would be like way too much.
Yeah.
So I stuck to the aunties. But because I grew up with them, everything except for, the murder, but everything else is very authentic. Like, I remember this scene where, the main character comes back home with this dead body, and
Right.
her mom is like, "Oh my God, I'm calling your aunts for help." And then while they wait for the ants to arrive, the mom is like, "Quick, we have to cut up some fruit so that, we don't like lose face, when they come and there's no fruit. That's just really rude." So like that was actually based on so my dad is diabetic, and at one point his blood sugar got like really low, like, to kind of like a dangerous
Right.
point. And so I can't remember why, but my mom was like, "Oh my God, we need to call your aunt." Um, and she was gonna come and take him to the hospital. I don't know why, like, because we have our own cars, but whatever. So she was coming, and then my mom was like, "Oh my God, I don't think we have any fruit in the house. Like, we just ran out. And oh my God, I can't, like," and then she was like telling the helper, like, "Quick, quick, like go out and buy some fruit." And I was like, "Well, auntie's gonna come here and presumably we're gonna rush dad to the car and to the hospital. She's not actually
Right.
gonna have time to eat the fruit. And why am I even worrying about fruit? I should be worrying about my dad right now."
Right.
And she's like, "No, like you don't understand. Like it's so rude. Like we know she doesn't have time to eat the fruit, but we need to like offer her the fruit, So like everything in there
Right.
is real. So I feel like readers know when the author is being inauthentic. Like I
Sure.
think it just comes across on the page. And so even though these situations in these books are so ridiculous, I feel like readers can sense,
Right.
when I am actually like talking from real life
Yeah.
experience.
It's so funny because I've written some characters in some of the books that I've written that just seem to be so over the top and,
Mm,
caricatures almost. And the funny thing is that
mhm,
most of the just completely over the top characters are based on real people. Like
mhm.
this really happened. These people really exist in the world. And those are the
Yes.
characters that resonate with people so much. And you'll get comments like, okay, that was made up, right? And you're like, well, I mean, kinda,
Mhm.
but not really, but
Yeah.
that there's something about just the over the top nature that like people can sense if that is even if it seems,
Mhm.
completely spun up. Those
Yes.
things really resonate with readers. They look for those out of the ordinary situations where people just
Mhm.
act completely out of what you think
Yes.
is normal. And so yeah. So
Yeah.
tell me about Vera Wong. Where did this character come from? And like after dial A for aunties, and you have hit a vein that's really resonating with readers.
Mhm.
Where did Vera Wong
Yes.
come from?
So after Dial A, I was like, "Oh, you know what would be fun?" Because in Dial A, the main character is a young woman, and the aunties
Mhm.
are side characters. And so I thought, well, you know what would be really fun is to have one of the aunties be the main character. And so then I just had this, uh, you know, like thought of kind of like an older woman, and she is like I actually, she's like 50% based on my mom and 50% based on my dad. And like again, like all the things she says, my parents have said, like
Sure.
my dad um like has berated me and my brother our entire life for not getting up at 4:30 in the morning. And
I had the same dad apparently.
they they say things like, "Oh my God, don't drink ice water because it will freeze the fats in your arteries and give you heart attack." Um, but they're okay with eating ice cream, which is okay,
Sure.
whatever. But
Yeah. Yeah.
like
Sure.
everything she
Right.
says is, I don't even have to come up with anything um, that she says. I just have to kind of like sit down and bring back my trauma.
Understood, understood.
Mm,
So when you first started thinking about the first Vera Wong book, and you kind of
mhm,
had some reasoning for this character, why
mhm.
she would be the way she was, how she,
Yeah.
might connect with readers. How did you start devising a plan to drop Vera into and and see how she would react?
Yeah, so I was like, okay, so my motto is when you feel like you're flailing in the story, throw in a dead body. And so I was like, well, let's just start right away, with a dead body. Like
Right.
she wakes up one morning and then like bam, dead body. And then I was like really stuck because up until that point I had never actually written a mystery. So like I've written a lot of suspense
Right.
thrillers, and then I wrote Dial A for Auntie. But in all of those books, they were not mysteries. Like who the killer
Sure.
was. It's the main character. And so I've never written like a pure, who done it. And oh my gosh, let me tell you how amateur I was. So I was like thinking, like, oh, so there's a dead body. Um, all right, I need suspects. Oh, and I need more than one suspect, probably. And so I was like,
Right.
what's a good number? Like, okay, four, whatever. And then I was kind of like thinking, like, why would they be suspects? And then I was like, oh my God, each of them has a motive to kill the guy. And, to me, when that thought came, I was like, oh my God, epiphany. Wow. Like, this is genius. And then now I realize, like, well, duh, of course, every suspect needs to have a motive. That's why they're freaking suspect.
Right. Well, and not only a motive, but the people that are not the murderer, you need to find
Hmm.
a good reason for them not to be a murderer, and
Hmm.
there really are a lot of details that you have to think through in the beginning, or come up
Hmm.
with them on the fly. Are you a planner? Do you plan out all of
Hmm.
these intricacies beforehand, or do you discover them as you're writing?
Hmm. So I used to be a pantser,
Yeah.
like write and discover. That was, I think I wrote the first three books that way, and it was very fun, like very, I would call it like a chaotic, fun, exciting experience. And then I realized like I'm spending like I write really fast. Like even back then, I was writing my second and third book like, but then it took her to get them something cohesive. And I realized like, well, I'm kind of wasting time doing it this way. So then I started learning how to outline. And at first I would only outline like half of the book before I got stuck. And then I'm like, okay, I'm gonna start writing. Then, but by the time I wrote Vera, I have already written enough books to know the process well. So, like, my outlines now like have zero chill. They're like 7 pages long. I have like a chapter by chapter summary of exactly like what is going to happen. And I know like some authors, they're like, oh, but what if your characters misbehave? And I like to say, I am a Chinese mother. My characters do not misbehave. Like,
I
they
love that.
don't know. Like, it's so funny because my kid, when she had to get a vaccination at her school, and she goes to an international school, and this like lovely British teacher was like, because my kid was crying, and her teacher was like, well, maybe you might decide that today is not the day you get the vaccination, and you can come a different day to get it. And I was like, oh, and I was like, well, can you excuse us for just a second? And then as she like walked away, I turned to my kid and I was like, listen up, you do not get a choice. You are getting that vaccination today. And she was like, but my teacher said, and I was like, no, your teacher is wrong. Okay, because you are Asian. Your choice is no choice. So that's what I'm like with my characters as well.
That's so funny. That's so funny. So after the first Vera Wong book, what made you want to follow that up with or did you release it knowing that it would be the first in a series, or did that come after the book came out and became a hit?
Mhm. Yeah, no, that came after. It really was supposed to be just one book because I found the process of writing a whodunit, oh my God, like brain breaking. It's so complicated.
Yeah.
And yeah, but then it came out and uh, my publisher, they really liked it, but they didn't think it was gonna be the breakout hit that Daddy for Aunties was gonna be.
Yeah.
So there wasn't like that much like buzz around it. But then it came out, and then all of a sudden my editor said, "Oh my God, it's actually doing even better than Dial A for Aunties." And so then she kind of was like, "Well, are you interested in writing a second?" And I was like, sure. Um, yeah, uh, let's do it.
When Dial A for Aunties is really the story of this big family that
Hmm.
and how they interact. Vera Wong has a big cast of characters and a lot of times a found family. How this group of people around kind of become family and become connected
Hmm.
was uh, and you may think that's a subtle difference, but it's a big interesting difference. Did was that more difficult to come up with, or did like what was your point of that you used to resonate with readers, that this was um like how is there a subtle difference? Is there a big difference in how you approach it from the family you're born with to the family that you create?
Mm, that's such a good question. So Dali for Aunties, I was just drawing from my own family.
Sure.
But then with Vera Wong, I think what I wanted to address actually was the deep-seated insecurity that exists within most of us.
Yeah.
So like every single character in Vera Wong um, is deeply insecure about something. And all of those insecurities were insecurities that I have or I went through so one of the characters in the first Vera Wong book was Julia, who is a mother of a toddler, and she's very insecure about herself as a mom. um, and that was what I went through when I had my first.
Mhm.
And she was a very quirky toddler. Like she would not talk to anyone ever, except for like me, my husband, and her grandparents. And then when she like talked to us, it would be in like beautiful long sentences, that were very long for her age.
Yeah.
Um, but then once she's like out with people, her thumb went in her mouth and she's just like sucking her thumb. Oh my God, and she was like 2.5. So everyone kept
Mm.
being like, have you taken her to the doctor? Because, I think, I'm seeing some red flags, so I was very fearful, very, filled with guilt, like mom guilt.
Mm.
And
Yeah.
so I really poured that and to Julia. And similarly with like all the other characters, they were just like difficult things that I've gone through, and I kind of felt like a lot of people would be able to resonate with those hardships.
There's a great article published by the Oxford alumni, and it's a an article slash interview with you, and the title of it is "From Finding It Hard to Get Out of Bed, Now I Complete Several Novels
Mm,
a Year." I think that's a that is a something that a lot of people struggle with when you feel like that you haven't found your thing, the you know the place
mhm,
where you fit in, and the place where you make a difference. What
mhm,
do you attribute finding your place, and what difference did that make? And because this, you may think, well, this is kind of a dramatic title, but I think a lot of people wrestle with this. When you feel like you
mhm,
don't have a purpose or haven't found your actual purpose, and then finding the thing that you're good at, that people appreciate,
mm,
that resonates with them, it really makes a huge difference. What advice would
mhm.
you give people who maybe feel like they haven't found their thing?
My advice, for people who haven't found their thing. I'm trying to think back to like how I did go from depression, to really
Mm,
like not getting out of bed some days. What did I do? You know what? Um, well, was it that? I think it was um finding, you know what? Yeah, I would attribute a very big part of it to finding my community.
mm,
Um, so my first book took me 3 years to write, partly because it's my first book. I didn't really know what I was doing,
yeah,
but also partly because of the depression and the feeling like, oh, I need to feel inspired to write, and then I would go to the computer, stare at a blank screen for hours, and then go back to bed.
right.
And then my husband found this writers forum, um, and I joined it. And I was lurking for a long time, but then after a while,
Sure.
I started posting, and I think I'm a pretty funny person because of like, you know, probably trauma. So, but like through like humor, I found friends, like
Yeah.
really good friends within that forum, like people I have never met in real life. But then I started chatting with them every day. And then one of them suggested, hey, do you want to try this thing? It's called a writing sprint. And we go for like 20-minute rounds. And, we kind of race each other during those 20 minutes to see who can write more words.
Yeah.
And at that time, we weren't even on chat. So, like, she and I would actually email each other. Like, she would email me, go. And then after 20 minutes, we'll email each other back again. And that one, oh my God, I found that so freeing. That's how I write now. I set 15-minute timers because 20 minutes feels really long.
Yeah.
And during those 15 minutes, like, I do not allow myself to like take a sip of my coffee or go to the bathroom. It's pure writing and no
Right.
deleting, unless it's a typo, then fine. But no deleting, just pure writing. And I wouldn't have found that technique if not for this random person I met on the internet. And I think it's so important to find your people because they are the only ones who can truly understand how hard the journey is.
Yeah.
Like, what's a literary agent? Most people don't know, only writers would know. And like, why is it so hard to find a literary agent? My parents are in real estate and they were like, if we want to sell a house, we just get a real estate agent. Like,
Right.
what is wrong with you? Like, why don't you just get a literary agent? So people don't understand, only your fellow writers can.
Right.
So find your people.
I love that, and that's such a great segue to our site. Storycraft.cafe is a community of writers just like you, and
Oh, I love it.
every Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday we have writing sprints, and a
Oh,
whole bunch of
wow.
people join us. And we do 3 20-minute sprints every Tuesday,
Hmm.
Wednesday, and Thursday. We have a great group of people that show up and do that. So join us there.
Wow,
Um,
I love that.
yeah, it's there's nothing like finding your group of people who understand the struggles that you're going through.
Hmm.
It's amazing.
Hmm.
We've got one last question that B put in, and before we go, Jesse, she says, "Do you have trouble with finding the right voice syntax for different aged characters, like generational characters, teen, adult, elder?" Like, and I think I understand what B is asking when you're creating this cast of characters, when you're finding their voice, how they talk. You know, are there exercises you go through to kind of separate this character from that?
Um, not really, because so again, so like the older characters, because I am drawing from people who are so close to me, then
Yeah.
it comes naturally, and then you know, and then in the middle ground, like people in their 20s and 30s, I'm like, well, it wasn't that long ago that I was in my 20s. Okay, actually, it was a very long time ago. But, I still remember it. But you know what's funny is that I started out writing YA, and I thought, genuinely believed that I would be a YA writer forever. Um, but the last YA book I wrote, I was reading the reviews. I do the never reviews. I did, and then one of the reviews was like, "Oh my God, this is why we shouldn't let millennials write YA."
Oh
So
no. Oh
and
no.
when I read that, I felt like I aged 100 years and turned to dust and got blown away. And I was like, okay, well, you know what? I had fun writing YA, and I think now I'm just way too old to write it.
Boy, probably why Gen Xers like me should definitely not write YA. So. Oh, Jesse, I love the new book. It comes out April 1st. It's called Vera Wong's Guide to Snooping on a Dead Man. So much fun, so authentic, and your books are breathing a breath of fresh air into the genre, and I love it so much. If people are just discovering you and want to find out all about what you're up to and new news coming up, and all of that good stuff, where's a good place for them to find you online?
The best place would be on Instagram. My Instagram handle is at Jessie Q Sutanto, and I post pretty regularly on Instagram. It's very chaotic. I post about my sourdough and my kids. So
Of course.
and also book updates. So yeah.
Great. And your website, can you give folks your website address?
It is jessieqsutantoauthor.com, but it is not up to date, I think. I don't know, I have to check. But
Gotcha.
Instagram is very up to date. So
Excellent. We'll put links to all that in the show notes to make it easier for folks
thank
to find
you.
you. Jesse, this has been so much fun chatting. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me. This was so fun. Best way to end my day.